Harvey, Hare, and his little brother Henry were walking home from school on a sunny Friday afternoon. The spring air smelled fresh, and flowers blossomed along the road in bright, cheerful colors. Henry was happily pulling his red wagon with their school packs inside as he did every day. Little Henry was a sweet and special child. He hardly ever spoke, and when he did talk, he did so very slowly and with few words. He did not act or react the way most other children did, but those who knew him appreciated his kind, loving nature and his keen attention to detail. Harvey was fiercely protective of his little brother, and that is why he dreaded what was about to happen. Harvey could feel his heart sink and his stomach tighten up as they came closer to the playing field. They had no choice but to pass this way on their way home from school. Harvey instinctively got closer to his little brother to protect him from what was coming. Gus Groundhog and his cohorts were playing soccer as they customarily did after school. The Hare brothers silently passed the field, hoping they would not get noticed. No luck. The moment Gus saw them, he started his usual taunts. "Hey boys, look who's here!" Gus yelled. "Henry the half-wit." Other boys laughed nastily at the joke. "The harebrained brothers." Henry's ears drooped, and Harvey balled his paws into fists, but the brothers kept walking past their tormentors. Gus and the other boys continued on with their insults and ridicule, but the brothers tuned them out and walked faster to get past. Once home, Henry sat at the hearth and played with his blocks, while Harvey helped his mother Harriet prepare dinner. "You're awfully quiet today, honey. Is everything all right?" Harriet asked as they chopped up carrots and celery for their dinner stew. "I'm just so sick of those bullies. Every day is the same thing. I wish I was a puma instead of a hare, so I could show that Gus a thing or two," Harvey lamented. "Oh, honey, I am so sorry," said his mother as she pulled him into a big hug. "Those silly boys have no hearts, but violence wouldn't teach them anything, and it certainly would not help either of you," she insisted. "Then what will? I have tried everything with that brute. Even the teachers talk to him. Nothing helps. He'll never stop," Harvey groaned. "Never say never," my mama used to say. "Nothing lasts forever, Harvey. You'll see," the wise mother Hare assured him. "Well, at least it's Friday and we don't have to go to school tomorrow," mumbled Harvey. Early the next morning, while Harvey and Harriet were still fast asleep, Henry got up and went outside. It was another beautiful spring day, and Henry liked to walk in the meadow to pick flowers and find pretty rocks. As always, he pulled his red wagon behind him in order to carry his treasures. After crossing the meadow and piling a trove of lovely artifacts into his wagon, Henry silently arrived to the riverbank. He was thirsty and intended to get a drink, but he found Gus Groundhog swinging from a rope over the stream instead. The embankment on each side of the stream was steep, and Gus was swinging from one side to the other from a rope that hung from a tall tree. Gus was having so much fun that he did not notice Henry quietly watching him. Suddenly, there was a loud crack, and the tree branch that the rope was attached to broke and fell into the stream right on top of Gus. Gus screamed. Henry gasped. Gus was crying and yelling for help. He was pinned under the branch and seemed to be having a hard time moving. Henry looked around and realized that they were alone and that the only one that could help Gus was himself. He left his wagon at the top of the embankment and carefully climbed down. He hopped from rock to rock in the stream until he got to the huge tree branch. Henry maneuvered around the tree limb until he found Gus's face. "Henry? Oh, great. I break my arm and the only person around is an idiot? Help!" yelled Gus. "Shh," demanded Henry. Gus obeyed with a look of shock on his face from hearing a sound come out of the young hare's mouth for the first time. Henry tried lifting the branch off of Gus, but it was too heavy. Gus groaned in pain as the branch shifted slightly on his arm. Henry then looked around and saw the rope that was still attached to the branch floating gently in the current. He waded into the stream, grabbed it, and splashed his way to the riverbank. Now on solid ground, Henry pulled the rope with all of his might. After several attempts, the branch slid off Gus, who let out a big sigh and slowly sat up. Henry waded back to the middle of the stream to where Gus sat and offered him his paw. A wide-eyed and bewildered Gus gave Henry his unharmed paw and let Henry pull him up. Henry then put Gus's arm around his shoulders and carefully guided him out of the fast-flowing water. When they reached the shore, they sat down to rest and gazed up at the steep embankment. "Now what do we do?" asked Gus in a worried voice. "I can't climb up there with my smashed-up arm." The unlikely pair sat in silence for a few minutes until Henry jumped up with an idea. The little hare examined the pebbles that bordered the stream and meticulously selected one. He then hopped from rock to rock across the current until he reached the broken tree branch which had settled among a group of large stones. He climbed onto the branch until he found the rope, and used his sharp-edged pebble to cut the rope and free it from the tree limb. He brought the rope back to Gus and started to tie it around the astonished groundhog's waist. The silent but determined hare then took the other end of the rope in his mouth and scrambled up the embankment. Once he reached the top, Henry tossed his side of the rope over a low but sturdy tree limb. The flabbergasted Gus watched as Henry took a deep breath and jumped onto the loose end of the rope. The skinny hare barely lifted the portly groundhog off the soil. Gus gave a sheepish grin and shrugged his shoulders. Henry used what little weight he had and jostled the rope as best he could, but it was no use. He was simply too small to leverage the chubby fellow off the ground. Henry sighed and swung to the edge of the embankment and sat down with a dejected look on his face. Gus started whimpering, with tears running down his whiskers, and cradled his broken arm. He was clearly in a lot of pain, and Henry once again felt resolved to work out a solution to their conundrum. He disappeared from Gus's view for several minutes. Gus heard a strange sound coming closer and closer, until he saw the hare rolling a huge stone to the edge of the embankment. Henry tied the dangling rope to the stone and turned to look down at Gus. The groundhog saw the resolved look on Henry's face and gulped loudly. Then he heard the little hare say more than he had ever heard him say in all the years he knew him. 1, 2, ready, go! Yelled Henry as he pushed the stone with all of his might over the edge. Down dropped the large rock, and up flew Gus, right up to the rim. Henry smiled and clapped his paws. Gus used his good arm to grab the ledge, and Henry helped pull him up onto the embankment. The companions lay exhausted and panting on the ground for several minutes. Once he recovered his breath, Gus looked Henry in the eyes and said with a quavering voice, "I was wrong about you. You are no idiot. You're a genius." Henry's eyes opened in surprise as he returned Gus's gaze. "I'm sorry, Henry," continued the repentant bully. Henry smiled shyly and simply said, "It's okay." The boys, now sudden friends, rested for a few more minutes. When Gus started to get up, he grunted and groaned in pain and said, "I need a doctor." Henry nodded in agreement. Without needing to say another word, they started walking towards Dr. Badger's house, which was near their school. Gus cradled his arm, and Henry pulled his red wagon through the field of rainbow flowers. A honey-fragranced breeze made the flowers dance as the bees and butterflies watched the companions walk silently side by side. Suddenly, Gus tripped and took a nosedive towards the ground. He instinctively put out his hands to stop his fall, causing his broken arm to take a cruel hit. He started to cry like a baby, this time in too much pain to keep up his tough guy facade. Kind-hearted Henry felt his arm hurt just by watching the poor groundhog. He patted Gus on the back as he sat and cried in the dirt. All at once, the little hare started taking his collection of pretty objects out of his wagon. He then guided his injured friend onto it. Gus lay in the wagon whimpering and groaning as little Henry pulled with all his might to get him to the doctor. What seemed like hours later, the boys arrived at Dr. Badger's house. Henry banged on the wooden door, which was nestled in the side of a hill. Benita Badger opened the door and looked in shock at the dirty, exhausted boys. "Dad," Benita called. "Come quick, someone's hurt." Dr. Badger appeared at the door in his house robe. When he saw the scene in front of him, he immediately got to work, guiding Gus into his home. "Benita, go quickly and get the boys' parents," he ordered his daughter. She nodded and rushed off. Henry, who could no longer move a muscle in his worn-out body, collapsed into his wagon and fell asleep. For several days, when Harvey and Henry walked home, they passed an empty soccer field. Harvey was secretly relieved that the bullies were gone, even if it meant one of them was hurt. For the first time in ages, he was able to simply enjoy the fragrant breeze, the birds singing, and the clouds blowing in the clear blue sky. Soon, however, these peaceful strolls came to an end. After school, the Hare brothers came upon a field full of the usual boys playing soccer. Gus stood in the middle with the referee whistle hanging from his neck and his broken arm in a sling. Harvey didn't know what to expect when they started to pass the field and the soccer players grew silent. "Hey, Henry," Gus called loudly. "Come over and play." Henry looked over at all of the smiling boys in the field and then up at his big brother. Harvey instinctively didn't trust them, but he saw the happy look on his little brother's face and let him go join the group. "You too, Harvey," Gus yelled. "We need another player on the green team." Harvey felt pulled in two directions and was stuck in place until he felt his little brother's paw pull him onto the field. A soccer ball came rolling towards Henry and he kicked it to one of the boys. The game was on, and the Hare brothers found themselves within the running, cheering group that they normally pass by each day. Soon Harvey forgot his worries and started enjoying himself. He noticed that the boys were paying extra attention to Henry and passing him the ball whenever possible. They cheered particularly loudly when he kicked it and made sure that no one stole the ball from him. "Okay, boys," Ref Gus shouted as he stood between the two teams at the center of the field. "This is it. Whoever makes the last goal wins the game," the groundhog shouted as he nodded meaningfully to his buddies. Gus blew his whistle, and the running, kicking, and shouting erupted again. The ball came speeding towards Henry, who kicked it down the field. The boys on his team encouraged him to keep running with it towards the goal. The little hare dribbled the ball down the field with no one in his way and kicked it with all of his might. The goalie dove and missed the ball as it glided into the net. Harvey stood in disbelief as all of the boys he so recently loathed screamed in joy at his little brother's winning goal. They all ran towards Henry and lifted him onto their shoulders, cheering him as though he were the most famous player in the world. Harvey was filled with so many emotions that tears came to his eyes while his little brother was simply elated with an enormous grin on his face. From that day forward, the Hare brothers joined their friends on the field and had fun after school. Gus became Henry's greatest protector and made sure that no one offended him in any way. Henry showed all who knew him that under his silent and sweet disposition was a smart and courageous boy. Moreover, everyone saw how Henry's compassion transformed a bully into a bodyguard.